Thank you for everyone for being here for this evening with us, and thank you, Jen, for being with us. Thank you to Bloomberg for the opportunity. And my name is Seckin Yilgoren. I'm leading security solutions for Mastercard North America, which includes cyber, AI, fraud, disputes, and digital assets. And I'm very honored to have Jen Martin with us from Citizens. Do you want to give a quick intro about yourself, and then we kick it off our very rapid fireside chat?
Yeah, so myself and my team lead the prevention, detection, and resolution of fraud for Citizens Bank. We're a top 15 bank based here in the Northeast. You see us all over the city.
Indeed. Welcome again. Thank you for being with us. So let's kick it off with the main question of today. What are the most pressing threats that you see in the ecosystem, especially from your perspective?
Well, it's a lot of what we just talked about today already. It is the volume and velocity of fraud. I've been in the fraud industry about 8 years, and what's really changed, especially in the past few years, is just this acceleration. There was a time where you'd have a fraud threat, you would put in controls, and then the next threat would come. And now, especially with the globalization, with the intensity of the technology, we're fighting, dozens of attacks, nation-state funded, global, organized, highly organized fraud in the ecosystem now, which is a lot different than it was a few years ago. And every year I say that, expecting, all the different technology, right? It just is going to continue to increase.
No, 100%. I think we are hearing, this is the theme of today, actually. We are all hearing from all the participants the same themes about the fraud and concerns. So we have, as Mastercard, we have a fantastic partnership with Citizens, with you and your team specifically. Can you please elaborate for the audience how our partnership actually help to develop solutions to the threats that you mentioned, or how we can accelerate the prevention of these?
Yeah, so the fraud prevention is really almost entirely dependent on access to data and insights. We heard that from our cybersecurity partners, and what we have with Mastercard is you have this broad network of data and intelligence. You're seeing transactions, billions of them all over the globe, and we have our transactions, and being able to marry those insights together. And then we have a very common, I feel like we have a common focus on our customers and enabling good transactions all day, every day, but then getting that right interdiction when it is fraud or a riskier transaction. And the investments you've made, the partners we mutually share, like intersect, your investment in decision intelligence and modeling and data, I think has been a good marriage of where we are, which is really leaning into that data and technology and insights to fight fraud.
No, 100%. Thank you for this. But I think it's very important, the partnerships, because at the end of the day, we are trying to secure the whole ecosystem, not only one partner or one network. Let's talk about scams. They mentioned in the previous panel. So last year alone, based on the FTC numbers, and U.S. customers lost $12.5 billion to scams. And these are only the reported numbers. The reality is actually harsher than this. Can you please maybe give some examples about how Citizens and Mastercard, we are collaborating to raise awareness to scams, and also how we can develop some proactive solutions to prevent scams before they happen?
Yes, and so we were just last week at the Global Anti-Scam Alliance Summit in D.C., surrounded by professionals who are all together, fighting this fight of scams. And scams are unique from a transactional standpoint because in most cases the consumer is part of the transaction. So it has different signals than traditional fraud, where you can say, oh, that is a bad IP and that looks malicious. When it's a scam from a transactional perspective, it's going to look like the customer is initiating that transaction because they are. And so the way that we need to look at the data is entirely different. And again, it goes back to that breadth of information that Mastercard has and that we can marry with our own to really try to identify that pattern for that customer looks different. And we should proactively reach out to them with some education and see if they are involved in a scam. And then I think, education, we're both mutually focused. Mastercard's got a lot of education, as do we, really trying to keep the consumers aware of the different threats of scams out there. I mean, we see that all the time, the toll booth, texts that come through, like there's different, iterations that we're all impacted. And so it's really getting that word out to consumers, do not click on the link, do not fall for the scams.
I think that's a very fair point. At the end, the education starts with all the participants. It's not only the network, merchants, issuers, government. I think it's all, because at the end of the day, if the consumers don't know what to do or they're not informed enough, everybody is suffering, and it impacts the digital economy because they are losing the trust to the digital economy, and they don't want to make any transactions anymore. And at the end, we all lose. So there was an interesting comment in the last panel that they thought that the fraud and cybersecurity is kind of operating in different places and is kind of silos, and which is a dream for the fraudsters, because as they are different silos, they can actually attack and they can abuse the opportunity. So, and the best way to break the silos, as you mentioned, is sharing the data, sharing intelligence. Can you give some example about how the sharing intelligence between different parties, a bank and a network, would be useful to fight the emerging trends or to be preventive about what's going to happen?
Yeah, so again, that's how we learn how fraud is, starting to pivot. We always want to be looking at what's changing in the ecosystem, and that's just not the transactional data that we might see in fraud. That is any data in the ecosystem. Who's, showing interest into your site, who's, trying to log in, where are those logins coming from? So it's a marriage of the cyber data as well as transactional fraud data, as well as a third, all of the external data that we can get as well to say that those are threats. And again, Mastercard has a global network, so that many participants use. So you might have a signal first that says this is fraud, and then we can benefit from that downstream.
100%. So we mentioned we have a great partnership, and we mentioned the last week of Global Anti-Scam Alliance. There's an organization between not only with Citizens, Mastercard, but all the other networks and all the issuers as well. What do you think would be the future for the collaboration? Because I think it's not only one bank, it's not only one network can fix this fraud problem, and cyber problem. What is the golden standard for collaboration, data sharing, in order to fight the good fight against fraud?
Yes, and I think it was mentioned earlier, we have ISACs too, right? So I think it's leveraging that. What I like, what we talked a lot about last week was whole of government and then public, private partnerships, right? It really is the whole of everyone. There's a global problem. I say fraudsters aren't brand specific. They're not looking for any one brand, or they're just looking for the weakest link to perpetuate their crimes. And so how do we as a whole ecosystem rally together and share our data to really fight the fight amongst all of us, because any weakness is weakness for all. And I just I think about the insights in the last section. It's not even, now we're in a place where it's just not even our consumer. We're also working with our consumers' agents, right? So that concept of authentication and identity is going to be even blurred more as, consumers want to pick up agentic commerce, which I think is going to become very popular faster than any of us want it to. And I almost died when he said almost 30 agents. People could have 30 agents, right? So that's, 30 different entities I could be giving authorization to transact on my behalf. That from, for a fraud perspective, that's the real acceleration of data and how we're going to need to collaborate to keep track of that.
100%. When you think about the agents, how to do a know your agent, there is the dispute component, cyber component, AI component, 100%. So if I want to summarize what we have, the key takeaways: data sharing, intelligence sharing, collaboration, and education, customer education. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things, coming together. And then, from anyone who's in the ecosystem, just everyone needs to lean in, right? We can't have any white space between us. It is everyone's fight. And so if you're anywhere, whether it's telco, social media, whatever you have to bring to support the cause, I think it's a whole of the industry.
100%. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you,
everyone. We'll just cue a video for you.